Welcome and welcome back, everybody, to the OK Grognard Show. Today is Wednesday, April 9th, 2025, a little after 10 a.m. Central in beautiful Lake Geneva, Wisconsin. Had a little blow up here I had to deal with, so I apologize for starting late for those of you who are watching during the Twitch stream live. Appreciate you coming and appreciate your patience. You know, a lot of shows are only going to be 10 minutes long, so stay in here until 10 after is kind of a really extra nice thing that you're doing for us. And don't think I don't appreciate it. What do we got going here? I tell you what, we're looking at the first edition Advanced Dungeons & Dragons Dungeon Master Guide section on player character racial tendencies. Now, this might sound a little troublesome because they're telling you if you play a particular race, this is potentially how you should play it. If you choose to play a dwarf or an elf, for instance, or a halfling, then there are certain things about those character races that are probably true of your character. And you can go against the norm. Obviously, R.A. Salvatore made bank on having a drow with a heart of gold. Well, not a heart of gold, but definitely not a typical drow. When you break the norm, that's when you get the kudos for being clever, right? And that's a thing. But the point of this is these are character races. These are player character racial tendencies. And they are more akin to literary tropes. Are they stereotypes? Well, literary tropes often are. And that doesn't make them bad. The idea behind them is that they give you a shortcut, a shorthand, a short form, a way to quickly buy into playing that type of character. They are not so different in a way, even in modern, current versions of Dungeons and Dragons, of backgrounds or, you know, any other way into playing a character. In fact, one could say that these tropes, these aspects, tendencies, racial tendencies. Racial tendency? Did I date her in college? No, I don't think so. These shorthand for playing this particular, for playing a dwarf, for instance, is a way to make it easier for someone who is playing that character to get off the ground. Because you can obviously do whatever you want with a character. And it may be true as much then as it was today, because there's so much less guidance in earlier Dungeons and Dragons for how to play a character, how to role play. They didn't even call it role playing in the earliest forms of the game. So while that was the nascent idea of what to do when you gathered around the table and started rolling the dice and started playing the game, it was all new then. So naturally, the sections of the book like this would lean upon literary tropes to help form the ideas of how to approach the game for individual players. So try not to get triggered by particular words or particular styles of writing in this case. It's certainly was never written to offend anybody, and while one might say that institutionalized forms of certain languages and actual human real-world tendencies might exist despite the best intentions of what somebody might want to be writing. Nah, you're looking for trouble. You're looking for problems in places where they really aren't in the first place. So try not to overthink it. That's my advice when it comes to such like this. But what's going on here? I wonder if I can do this and bigify it even more. Oh yeah, it's a view, right? Yep. Yeah, most of it. Okay. We'll take care of the last line on our own, I suppose. Let me just have a quick read of some of this and we'll talk about it. As a general rule, the player will develop the personality and other characteristics of his or her persona in the campaign, and little or no DM interference is necessary in this regard. So there you go, right out of the gate. They're saying, let them have at it, let them find their way to a character, let them play their character, and if they're off to the races, don't get in the way. To find the general height and weight of a PC, use the tables given for the development of NPCs. We've been over those before. Under age, height, weight, NPC traits. Alignment must certainly affect, if not dictate, much of the actual behavior of each PC, and so it will affect characteristics as well. Personally, I don't use alignment. Certainly not as a way to tell a player how to play a character. I do use it behind the screen as a way of gauging what a character has already done, and I don't allow evil in my campaign. So if someone does evil things at the end of that campaign, if they have not atoned, they become an NPC and hand them over to me, and then they can roll up a new character. That's how I avoid evil in my campaigns. Continuing, in this regard, it is important for you to see that the particular characteristics of each persona meet with the overall character and alignment of the individual adventurer concerned. Racial tendencies can also be a factor. Consider the following guidelines. So here's how we get into some of the stereotypes. Dwarves tend to be dour and taciturn. They are given to hard work and care little for most humor. They are strong and brave, but they also enjoy beer, ale, mead, and even stronger drink. Their chief love, however, is precious metal, particularly gold. They also enjoy gems, of course, particularly those of opaque nature, except pearls, which they do not like. Of opaque nature, and diamonds. They like the earth and dislike the sea, considering that their women tend to be bearded too. Oh, Gary. Putting facial hair on female dwarves, well, that's okay. It is not surprising that some dwarves are somewhat forward in their behavior towards females, not so adorned. If dwarves are a trifle suspicious and avaricious, they generally make up for such faults. I can't even see the bottom of this because it's blocked. So there you go. Let me just pop that off for a second. Yeah, I got to remember to do my to do my things, my visual aids a little less, leave a bit of a border, right? They generally make up for such faults by their courage and tenacity. Okay, so a few things here. Obviously, written by a male, and from the point of view of you're playing a male dwarf, that seems to be assumed in the writing. Okay. You know, that could have been written a little more openly. They could have said it either neutrally or from both sides. They kind of assume that you're going to play a male dwarf here, and when they say, considering that their women tend to be bearded too, it's not surprising that some dwarves somewhat forward in their behavior toward females. Well, some male dwarves. So, you know. I think, given it comes out of a wargaming background, and most wargamers in the early days were men, the assumption is that the vast majority of the readers of this were going to be men. And so that is how they dealt with the text. And, you know, one could say Gary could have done a better job. But you know what? You write to your audience. And if you know for a fact that most of your audience are men, why wouldn't you write to them? So, yeah, one could argue if you wrote it more openly, it might have been more open toward women joining the hobby a little earlier, a little sooner, back in the day, and I don't disagree with that. So, it's all true. But this is what we have, and we're looking at what we have, and we're looking at why we have what we have a little bit. But for the most part, I think it's important to recognize that right out of the gate, Gary says, as a general rule, the player will develop the personality and other characteristics of his or her persona in the campaign, and little or no DM interference is necessary in this regard. And you know what? If you read no further, you really don't run into any problems in this section of the game. So take that as a warning to the deeper you dig, the more likely you're going to potentially uncover some 70s talk. And that's just something you should know. You know, the dwarves found that out in Moria, didn't they? By digging deeper. Let's continue a bit with some of the other racial tendencies. Elves are considered flighty and frivolous, and this is the case when they do not believe a matter is of import. They concern themselves with the natural beauty around them, dancing and frolicking, playing, singing, unless necessity dictates otherwise. Because elves love nature, they are not fond of ships or mines, but of growing things and the land under the sky. They do not make friends easily, but friend or enemy is never forgotten. Their humor is clever, as are their songs and poetry. Elves are brave, but never foolhardy. They feast, but eat sparingly, drink mead and wine, but seldom become drunk from excesses. While they find well-wrought jewelry a pleasure to behold, they're not overly interested in money or gain. Magic fascinates elves, however, and if they have a weakness, it lies in this desire. If elves tend toward haughtiness or arrogance at times, they are not inclined to regard their friends and associates as anything other than equals. So there are gems in here if you're looking to be generous with the interpretations of things. Certainly that last line is an important one. Flighty or frivolous? Okay. The general nature of literary elves is that they are like fairies, can tend to interfere with humankind and play little tricks on them, and an elf can be a bit of a minx when it comes to dealing with other individuals, but amongst their kind, where they're from, their culture is rich with songs and poetry, and they are long-lived, so, or long-lived, as I've heard in more recent years as language has changed. The idea that they wouldn't have a rich culture would be anathema to the actual literary tropes and what those suggest. So there you go. Magic fascinates elves. Okay, so if you want to incorporate that into a character you're playing and have them be always excited whenever there's magic in the world. You know, interesting, since there's kind of a dichotomy here that they're so fond of nature and so close to nature, magic somehow fascinates them. So they know that it exists, but it's certainly unnatural, right? Or can it sometimes be natural magic when it's druidic, for instance? So there's some thoughts on that. Gnomes are most lively and full of humor. Often on the black side are practical jokes, pranks. They enjoy eating and can drink as much as dwarves do. Somewhat reserved. They are sly and furtive with those they do not know or trust. And even somewhat reserved with most bigger folks, such as elves and humans. Gnomes love all sorts of precious stones, and they are masters of gem polishing and cutting. In most other respects, they are not unlike dwarves, but they enjoy the open world of growing things almost as much as their mines and burrows. So there you go. A little less like dwarves than some games might suggest for them, but not so much like elves. They're not just like tiny elves, and they're not just like an alternate version of a halfling either. Gnomes get short-sheeted often in games that I've seen run, so I am not surprised that their description there is kind of in regard to how they fit in amongst the other races. In this one, half-elves, of course, even more so. Half-elves are usually much like their elven parent in characteristics, although to somewhat lesser extent than a pure elf. There you go. That's all you need to know about a half-elf. Almost an elf. Very much like an elf. But maybe not quite. Halflings are quite similar to gnomes. Now it's the shoes on the other foot, right? Because they're doing these alphabetically. We've got to describe halflings in comparison to gnomes, even though halflings been around longer as far as the game is concerned, are quite similar to gnomes, although they eat more and drink less. They also are prone to favor natural beauty in the outdoors more than they do their burrows. They are not forward, but they are observant and conversational, if in friendly company. Because they are more open and outgoing than either dwarves or elves, they get along with most other races far better than the former two do. Halflings see wealth as a means of gaining comforts only, for they love creature comforts. If they are not overly brave and ambitious. They are generally honest and hardworking when there is need. Halflings love stories and good jokes, and are perhaps a trifle boring at times. Well, I often see a lot of kicked up fuss about how Gary didn't get influenced by Tolkien either at all or very little in his and you know what, I love that there's a lot of stuff that Robert E. Howard and other authors of the day, pulp fantasy, influenced in the game. Vancian Magic, I think Daddy Roll the Run just did a whole video mainly on the magic systems of D&D and what Gary was interested in, and said in letters about that. Go watch that video. Very interesting. It's long, close to a couple hours. Put it on take a long drive and listen to it in your vehicle. Or while you're exercising. Are you a gamer? Am I talking to the crowd here? The thing here, though, is halflings are definitely a Tolkien invention. Sure, they're called hobbits, and they used to call them hobbits in D&D before they got their wrists slapped and told, can't call them that. That's IP. And, burrows, and they love stories and good jokes, and trifle boring at times. How many of these literary tropes were born of Tolkien? Come on. And even the elf and dwarf tropes, well, Tolkien wrote on the backs of sagas and stories of old. By all means, a lot of the things woven in here are shorthand for what Tolkien would have used as his literary Bible when writing his many tales. So, the manocentric world of Middle-earth, notwithstanding, elves, dwarves, halflings, not so much gnomes, half-elves, to half-elves even, well, Elrond. We know of one, at least, that is described at some length. And it's not a lot of other literature that influenced D&D that would have included stuff like that, on which Gary could have based stuff like this. So, was he influenced by Tolkien? I don't know. I'd have to say, methinks he doth protest too much when saying that he wasn't. So there you go. Half-orcs, I don't use them in my games, but they're in here. And that is something that I do have to say, looks like I got myself a little Spammerooski in the old time him out. We gotta block this guy from the channel. Anyway, half-orcs are boars. Maybe that's what I just had in my chat, was a half-orc spammer. In any event, boars. Not boars like the creature, but boars like the individual you find at a party when you're cornered and they're telling you about everything you don't want to hear about. They are rude, crude, crass, and generally obnoxious. Because most are cowardly, they tend to be bullies and cruel to the weak, but they will quickly knuckle under to the stronger. This does not mean that all half-orcs are horrid, only most of them. If neither means that they are necessarily, it neither means that they are necessarily stupid or incapable. They will also seek to gain the upper hand and dominate those around them, so as to be able to exercise their natural tendencies. Half-orcs are greedy too. They can, of course, favor their human parent, more than the orcish one. So that's our out, right? That is how we say that they may look like a half-orc, but they essentially act like they're human family members. In any event, I was never a fan of using half-orcs as characters. I don't like the implication of how they became who they are. At least in early D&D, there was always the idea that orc raids would have caused some bad situations for the women of villages and whatnot, and one thing leads to another. So rather than have that in the game at all, I just said, all right, no half-orc PCs. In fact, half-orcs don't exist. And even though I allow half-elves, aside from that, I don't, in my own campaigns, consider it possible for species to procreate with one another. That's how I avoid a lot of problems with my games. I don't allow evil. I don't allow half-orcs. I don't allow assassins or monks in my campaigns. So there you go. My monks are more traditionally like medieval monastic orders rather than Eastern martial artists. So, doesn't really fit in my setting. Doesn't mean it can't be used in yours. And certainly anything I do is only what I do, not something you have to do. But there you go. That is a little look inside the DMG, particularly on a section that I think probably gets much maligned by folks in here and now that are looking for reasons to claim that there were problems in the early writing. Not that there weren't problems, but if you go looking for a dog turd, you can quickly step in one, that's for sure. Just go to a dog park. That's where you want to go. Step on the wrong end of a rake while you're there and say hello to the people that are listening to you, because I don't find that productive. In any event, this has been the OK Grognard Show, talking about the first edition Advanced Dungeons & Dragons Dungeon Master Guide, Player Character Racial Tendencies section. Thank you very much. Went pretty long today. That's how it goes sometimes. The show streams live on Twitch each Wednesday at 10 a.m. Central, and then it's archived on YouTube. Like, subscribe, follow, comment, all of that fun stuff would be greatly appreciated. And support the show, even at the free level, on my Patreon site. You can find a link, direct link in the show notes there. But join other people like Tom Tullis of Fat Dragon Games, Carlos Lysing of Castle Entertainment, Heath Varnden of the AD&D 20, Dave O'Brien, an unauthorized user, Heidi and Eric, Gygax Garland of Gaxland, Vince Ragusa, thanks for being in the chat today, Vince, of the Maroon Room, a great prog band, Daniel Caldwell of Griffin and Gargoyle, Christian Garcia and Stephanie Lesniewski-Gruchow, Cera Toppilopkus, Colin Szablewski, and as always, DM Extraordinaire Shane Bradley. This has been the OK Grognard Show from beautiful Lake Geneva, Wisconsin. Bye-bye.